Yeah, one of the recipes that I get asked to make a lot is collard greens cooked Southern style. It's really not a difficult recipe, but it's pretty easy to mess up or not get the desired results you're looking for in terms of that smoky taste. Whether you're using fresh collard greens or bag collard greens, like I'm using in this case for convenience and quickness, you want to clean those greens pretty good. A lot of people think because they're bagged, pre-washed, that they're going to be automatically clean to your liking, but there's still a risk of finding like some of that dirt in there that just makes for unpleasant eating experience. And so you want to make sure that you go the extra. Onions are really essential in a collard greens dish. I try to cut mine like in a thicker slices. I want them to be able to have the time to kind of sweat and saute to kind of bring out that natural sweetness when we start to cook. And so the bigger they are, the more they can kind of withstand the sauteing, right, without getting crispy and kind of flimsy. For a stock, I typically will make mine homemade, but on occasion when I don't have time, I will use a store-bought. I tend to go with a low sodium based chicken stock because I'm going to be adding salt anyway in terms of my seasoning mix, and you don't want to have so much salt content and have an overly salty collard greens recipe. You're going to need some acidity to kind of break up with the richness of the fat, but also to kind of balance out the bitterness of the greens. I go with an apple cider vinegar. It's got a certain level of sweetness, and that sweetness is going to be important also, getting it from different sources to kind of balance things out. That's really like the key, in my experience, to having a really, really good collard greens dish is that balance of sweetness, acidity, and then just the natural taste of those collard greens. I like to mix my spices up ahead of time. I got a core group of spices, paprika, a really smoky paprika, and that's the red that you see there mixed up, along with some allspice, salt, and pepper. I do this ahead of time so I can just kind of continuously add spicing, seasoning as I go to have a well-seasoned dish. I work with a few big cloves of garlic. I like to smash them up. I don't chop mine up. I just smash mine up and kind of help open up the flavor and just drop them right in the pot. You're going to need a sweetener, as I talked about. For me today, it's molasses. You can use maple syrup, brown sugar, all are good sweeteners to counteract some of the savory flavors that you're going to be dealing with here, particularly that bitterness. Smoked meat is essential if you're going southern style that's not vegan. I'm going with smoked turkey, a leg. You can use smoked turkey tails. You can use smoked ham hocks, other smoked pork items, or smoked beef, whatever you choose to get that magical smoke flavor into the dish. I like to start with my turkey leg. I'm going to render the fat, get some of the flavor release, but also have that fat in the pot for when I saute some of my aromatics like the onions and the garlic, just adding more flavor on top of flavor. And so you really want to get these a good browning, really more so to kind of release that flavor. And then I'm going to saute my onions. I like to saute mine slowly but over time because, again, the natural sweetness in the onions begin to caramelize, and that sweetness and that flavor is going to be essential in just kind of adding those layers of flavor that we're striving for here. And then I'll just add in the garlic, and I got the makings of a really, really good dish. The kitchen should be smelling pretty good right about now with the onions and the garlic just kind of sauteing in the pot. And then I like to add some seasoning here, that mix again up front, and then I'm going to continue to add it throughout the cooking process to get those layers of flavor that really make for a fire, just bomb, really good greens dish. And so you see we got some color there. The flavor when you heat up those spices really helps to intensify the flavor there. And then I'm going to start adding my stock. Like I said, I'm using commercial stock, preferably using like a homemade stock that's like really, really complex and just kind of cooked to my liking. But I'm going to bring this to a boil and let it simmer. I like to let mine stew for a bit before I add the greens because I find that the more those flavors have time to kind of come together, the more flavorful that stock is, and you get just a better pot liquor, which we'll talk about later. But pot liquor is like really, really critical to having a really good collard greens dish. I could add my sweetener now that the ingredients have kind of come together. I'm really concerned about that balance, the sweet against the bitterness of the greens and all the savory elements. And so it's really important to kind of have that, but you want to add it a little later in the cooking process, not up front, because the sweetness will start to dissipate, if lessen if you add it too early. So now I bring my legs back, and I'm gonna let that cook a little bit, and infuse that stock with the smokiness before adding my greens. The really good and underrated part of cooking greens is how you chop them. When you buy them bagged, they're chopped pretty evenly, and that's another benefit of using the pre-packaged greens. But if you're cutting them yourself, you want to cut them as evenly as possible. They don't have to be perfectly the same, but you want to have them even so they cook at the same rate and break down at the same rate. So, you're going to let these simmer in a pot for at least 30 minutes, but you can go well into that. You'll start to notice the meat, the smoked turkey, start to break down, start to pull away from the bone, start to soften and get real tender. And that's a good sign, a good indicator that it's probably time to take those greens out. And they'll start to change color over time as well. They'll become like a really, really dark green. As you heard me say before, I continuously add seasoning, and I try to cook those greens down. So don't worry about like overfilling your pot with the greens, because eventually, as they steam within the pot, they stew in the pot, they're going to condense and become a little more tighter in the pot, and they'll break down, and that liquid will start to absorb, or the greens will absorb that liquid and start to just kind of break down a little bit more. And so you can see that dark green color I'm talking about. So you got the color, you got the smells, you got the flavor. So everything's kind of coming together, and you can give it a taste test at this point, quality control. So for me at this point, I like to take the meat out and just use 2 forks to shred it up or just break it down into smaller pieces, and then I'll add it back into the greens. This way I've gotten the smoke infused into the pot liquor, but also by adding the pieces back, when you serve it up, you have the texture you want. You have the contrast against those leafy greens with the meatiness from the smoked turkey. It's also an opportunity to kind of pull away any of the excess fat that's on the turkey at this point. And that just adds to the overall eating experience with those greens. And so this is really it. I mean, as you can see, it's not that complicated, but you have the makings of a really good dish, pulling from different flavors, whether it be the greens, the seasoning, and the smoked turkey, and the aromatics, all just kind of come together over time, and you got this well-balanced, well-cooked, well-seasoned collard greens dish that'll stand up against pretty much anybody's recipe. Now, obviously, if you kind of get comfortable with this, you can start to add in different things and make it your own and tweak it, etc., and just continuously optimize it. But this is like really it. It's a great starting point for a really good collard greens dish. And so, hey, what do you serve it up with? For me, I like to mix mine with some hot water cornbread, as well as serve it with a nice pepper sauce. Sometimes that's a homemade sauce, and that's it. I'm good to go with my dish. Yeah. So back to the cornbread thing, though. If you ever had hot water cornbread, I highly recommend it and serve it with your greens. Obviously, you can use regular cornbread of your liking, but that's just kind of an old school favorite of mine that my grandmother used to make, and I always think to pair with greens. Same with pepper sauce. We have just like jarred peppers with vinegar that we just collect over time, and it becomes this really good sauce that we use. Obviously, you can buy like Trappies or whatever, but that's a dish. If you're feeling this dish, definitely let me know in the comments, but also hit that like button. More importantly, hit the red subscribe button, and you can get new recipes from me right to your inbox when I update each week. That's it. Thanks for vibing with me. Peace out. Until next time, I'll see you next week. Word.